South of Hudson's Bay, James Bay, and at the southern tip of James Bay, the settlement of Moose Factory. News Magazine salutes Education Week with films of an Indian residential school 500 miles north of Toronto. Principal Eric Barrington dispenses first aid among his many other duties. He heads one of Canada's 69 Indian residential schools, scattered in key locations as far north as the Arctic Circle. They've a total of 11,000 pupils, orphans, convalescents, those who live too far in the wilderness to get to a daily school. They learn not only games and traditions, such as the celebration of St. Valentine's Day, but the mastery of words, which will open to them the whole range of the ordinary Canadian curriculum. For children who live with the midnight sun in their summer holidays, an explanation. They come to school in September, go home for holidays in June. Instead of the isolation and neglect of the past, a free and equal chance with children in urban centers.
I stand before you today to offer an apology to former students of Indian residential schools. The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children from the influence of their home, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant culture. These objectives were based on the assumption that Aboriginal cultures and spiritual beliefs were inferior and unequal. Indeed, some saw it, as was infamously said, to kill the Indian in the child. Today we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong, has caused great harm, and has no place in our country. The Government of Canada built an educational system in which very young children were often forcibly removed from their homes, often taken far from their communities. Many were inadequately fed, clothed, and housed. All were deprived of the care and nurturing of their parents, grandparents, and communities. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages and cultural practices were prohibited in these schools. Tragically, some of these children died while attending residential schools, and others never returned home. The government now recognizes that the consequences of the Indian residential schools policy were profoundly negative, and that this policy has had a lasting and damaging impact on Aboriginal culture, heritage, and language. While some former students have spoken positively about their experiences at residential schools, these stories are far overshadowed by tragic accounts of the emotional, physical, and sexual abuse and neglect of helpless children and their separation from powerless families and communities. It has taken extraordinary courage for the thousands of survivors that have come forward to speak publicly about the abuse they suffered. It is a testament to their resilience as individuals and to the strengths of their cultures. Regrettably, many former students are not with us today, and died never having received a full apology from the Government of Canada.
身為一名社工，有好多人都會問我都係做啲乜嘢嘅，以及兒童與家庭發展廳到底係點樣嘅機構。首先，兒童與家庭發展廳嘅目的係支持家庭、青少年及兒童。社工與其他工作人員願意協助每個有需要嘅家庭。我哋為家庭同兒童提供好多唔同嘅服務。 包括青少年司法與服務 （Youth Justice and Youth Services）、兒童與少年心理衛生 （Child and Youth Mental Health）、早期兒童發展、兒童託管、兒童與家庭發展 （Early Childhood Development、Child Care、Child and Family Development） 以及針對有特殊需要兒童所提供嘅服務 （Services for Children with Special Needs）。
The purpose of the child protection system is to pretend to promote the best interest of the children, while in fact they are ensuring all stakeholders involved are protected, profiting, and growing by continuously warehousing and trafficking slightly higher numbers each year. This is apparent in the Children's Aid Society's own annual reports. The majority have slightly higher numbers each year, like some sick kind of funding formula was being implemented. So, what we have here is a private cartel which has gone into partnership with the government. They have used this relationship to force the public to participate under rule of law, and the government has given corporations and businesses the power to help stabilize and stimulate local economies. This ensures the system's continued existence and growth. With unchallenged, unaccountable monopoly, where the system will claim the government is not protecting children if it's not given what it's won. That is not good. Now, to further understand the economic benefit of such a partnership, one only has to look at the stakeholders. Those really benefiting will make money, pay taxes, and spend their earnings, for the most part, in their local communities. We can start with the frontline workers, their supervisors, their managers, secretaries, paid volunteers, foster parents, and then the agency's many directors, to name a few. Keep in mind, this is only the first line of benefactors. Then we have to consider the lawyers, normally 2 or 3 per case, the judge, the law clerks, the court reporters, and the related legal staff. This is the second line of benefactors. Then there is the most dangerous third line of benefactors, the mental health professionals. These are the psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, and doctors. These benefactors can cause serious damage to children and families. They're the ones that use fallacy of assumption, fallacy of authority, opinion, and select information given to them by the first and second line of benefactors. These are the ones that medicate, traumatize, and destroy children and their families, making millions for the mental health industry. As some evidence shows, some of these individuals work exclusively on referrals from the Children's Aid Society. Not to say there aren't good, dedicated, hard-working people attached to this system. We can also see this in a few reports and some scattered case law, where some professionals have stated that medication and therapy is used only as a means to control the clients, including the children. But there is no other benefit. Many admit these drugs have lasting, negative, and cumulative effects. This can make it impossible for some individuals going through this system to function as normal, productive citizens later in life. Again, this is another win-win for the system. The system can now claim that these individuals experienced in their early childhood years has made them incapable of caring for their own children. As a result, their children will be apprehended with the time-tested allegations of mental illness, using once again fallacy, assumption, and opinion. Now the cycle can continually repeat itself. It is a very disturbing and abusive system by its own definition that deals with the most vulnerable citizens with absolutely no oversight or accountability. This must change. In closing, I would just like to thank all of those who are trying desperately to reform this corrupt and damaging industry. But closer to my heart is all of you, speakers, officials, and participants. You are the ones who will ultimately change this system for the better. Your hard work and dedication and courage is very much appreciated. Thank you, everyone, for showing up.
初生女嬰喺母親坐月期間發生嚴重嘅健康問題，引起省兒童廳嘅關注，並且將隨行嘅6歲女兒帶走，並且係交由寄養家庭暫時照顧。
喺今日，女嬰嘅父母同代表律師就接受英文報章省報嘅訪問，但係就拒絕接受本台記者嘅提問。吳欣欣嘅報導。
女嬰嘅父母李氏夫婦今朝10點已經到達黃仁鐸律師位於列治文嘅事務所，接受省報記者嘅訪問。據明報喺2月1號嘅報導，本身要回流北京嘅李氏夫婦喺08年10月帶同6歲嘅大女入住列治文一間無牌經營嘅坐月中心。太太喺12月誕下女嬰之後就繼續喺中心坐月，直到上個月17號，女嬰被發現身體有問題，送院後證實腦部受傷，懷疑患上搖晃嬰兒綜合症。兩人嘅大女就被省兒童廳接到寄養家庭暫住。
They were labeled child abusers, suspected of shaking their newborn, their children taken away. Now, documents have surfaced suggesting a very different scenario. Their baby may well have a serious illness that's often mistaken for abuse. Still, as Kathy Tomlinson reports, the fight to reunite the family goes on.
Protesting outside the BC Premier's office, Paul and Zabeth Bain want their children back. All three were put in foster care more than a year ago, the parents suspected of shaking and injuring their newborn.
It's not shaken baby syndrome.
New evidence suggests their baby has an entirely different problem, a rare, serious disease.
This whole thing was a medical condition and an accident, and we just want them to admit their mistake.
We can't do anything for our baby right now, and she really, really needs us.
2 months ago, the children's foster mother sent an email to social workers about the baby's medical reports. I noticed the baby's sister was diagnosed with glutaric aciduria. I decided to do a Google search. Children with glutaric aciduria are often misdiagnosed with, believe it or not, shaken baby syndrome.
It's in the medical reports according to the foster parent, and it needs to be addressed.
Glutaric aciduria is a genetic disorder with varied symptoms, sometimes bleeding and swelling of the brain. Medical sources say it has been mistaken for child abuse, and children with this disorder can die.
If a suspicion of the diagnosis is there, then this would warrant further investigation.
The parents say they've been kept in the dark about all of this.
One of her doctors said she needs treatment now.
The minister responsible says he can't talk about the case.
But anytime a child is taken into care, they're provided, medical attention when that's required, and we rely on, very top qualified pediatricians and others to advise us.
The Bains now want their 19-month-old baby girl assessed and treated immediately. Their case to get their family back won't be heard in court for months. Kathy Tomlinson, CBC News, Chilliwack.
Treasure Coast mom is in police custody for trying to keep her kids out of state custody. She dodged DCF, but she didn't dodge the cops, and tonight she's talking to 25 for help. Jim Abbott has an exclusive jailhouse interview with a woman who says she was arrested for protecting her kids.
I'm not about to just hand my kids over to them with no findings of abuse, no hotline call, no cause whatsoever.
So Jessica LeBoy decided this time she wouldn't let Florida's Department of Children and Families take her 3 children. She'd rather go to jail.
I'd rather be here than have, just me being here than have 3 kids somewhere where I don't know where they are.
2 years ago, DCF took the 2 children she had at the time. After caseworkers said they'd received reports of what they didn't say. But LeBoy says while her 2-year-old was in DCF care, he wound up with several bruises and may have been sexually molested. LeBoy sued DCF, and when caseworkers returned in December to take her kids again, LeBoy figured it was retaliation.
Because they know I have a lawsuit with them and that I'm planning on doing stuff to them, I think that when my name's hit the head of the department, that's what triggered this all to come to me like this.
And DCF has gone to 3 of LeBoy's friends as well, taking children from 2 of them. Tammy Young says her daughter is missing. Joanna Rodriguez says her 2 daughters may have head lice. And Heather Carol Lopez, a witness in LeBoy's case, is now being investigated.
Her caseworker had threatened me that she said, if you don't leave now, then you're going to have problems with your kids.
We tried to talk to DCF about the case, but they refused to comment. Jessica says they refused to comment to her as well. In fact, they set up a couple hearings after first trying to take the kids away in December, but never told her about them. She had her first court hearing since being in jail this morning. The judge asked her if she'd tell him where the kids were. She said no.
The judge told me today, he's like, well, if you just tell me where the kids are, we'll leave them where they are. I'm like, I don't believe you. You're not going to give me that in writing. I'm not giving in to anything you say.
LeBoy says she hasn't told anyone where her children are, not even her mother.
To be honest with you, if I did, I wouldn't say. I'm behind my daughter 100%.
Jim Abbott, WPBF News 25.
The reaction has been swift to our story on last night's news hour about the family torn apart by allegations of abuse. The parents told us that they'd done nothing wrong, that they loved and cared for their children, and the allegations against them were false. Even the family doctor backed them up, saying that the children's problems were a result of premature birth. But as Aaron MacArthur reports tonight, that contention is still being challenged.
A happy moment between mother and daughter, caught on tape. Part of the 4 hours a week Zabeth Bain gets to spend with her baby. Bethany was seized by the government after suffering a head injury 8 months ago. The abuse team at Children's Hospital says shaken baby syndrome. It's a claim the Bain family denies vigorously, and they've spent the better part of the last year trying to clear their name.
Well, we've just taken out a second mortgage on our home. Yeah. We saved and saved, and we bought a place in Hope. We have half an acre, beautiful new home, bedroom for each of the kids, and yeah, we've had intense lawyer bills. The doctors, you have to pay them for the services, and even just gas mileage. It's just been a heavy drain.
While they are fighting an uphill battle, there is support for the Bains. Dr. Pat Blackshaw has spent time with all 3 children. She's convinced there is no sign of abuse or neglect.
I watch them as they bring up their kids and deal with all the difficulties of very premature children. They're excellent people, caring, loving, and I do not believe that they have abused their kids.
And Dr. Blackshaw is not alone. Specialists from across the globe have written opinions which support Zabeth's claim her daughter's injuries were caused by a collision with her older brother. Dr. John Galaznik, a pediatrician, writes, the skull fracture fits with crush injury, not shaking. The absence of observed bruising is also more consistent with crush between brother's body and floor than with head abusive slamming impact. He goes on, the assertion that this case represents injury from abusive shaking is not supportable. There is no justification for alleging that it represents abuse in any form. A noted hematologist, Dr. Michael Innes, casts further doubt on the diagnosis of shaken baby. The evidence for a natural cause of Bethany's illness is overwhelming. While the doctor's reports pile up, certain members of Zabeth and Paul's former church are convinced Bethany was abused based solely on anecdotal evidence, none of whom are willing to appear on camera for this story. But an advocacy group called Protect Our Children is willing to stake its reputation on the Bains' credibility.
We were definitely convinced that a wrong was done when the young lad was taken away, and we firmly stand behind the Bains and their quest to have the child returned.
Despite the mountain of evidence, along with character references, there is no convincing the social workers. The fight for Bethany's custody continues.
Hello, my name is Bill Bowen. I'm the writer and director of the short documentary film you're now watching, and as well the full-length film which will follow and come out in the winter of 2009-2010. This is Tasha Cran.
I found out that my daughter had been murdered a month after she died.
At the age of 19, she had a baby, and the baby had a thyroidal condition that required a very expensive and specific type of medication. Tasha left Washington State because of an abusive relationship she was in, and she traveled to Oregon in order to try to obtain medical insurance for her child so that she could get that vitally needed medicine. Instead, the state of Oregon, CPS, charged her with medical neglect when she asked for that help and took her child from her. Tasha was told that her daughter would be placed either with the foster parents, who Tasha knew loved the little girl and would take care of her, or with her aunt in Washington State, who had a licensed medical foster home. And Tasha was quite comfortable with that. Instead, unbeknownst to her, the little girl was sent to live with an aunt and uncle of the abusive father in Mexico.
I was born and raised in the United States. My daughter was born here in Hillsboro, Oregon at Tuolumne Valley Hospital. I honestly didn't think it was possible for them to deport a U.S. citizen. The original story was that my daughter had died of asthma.
She's got a periorbital, which means around the eyes. That was purposeful. Somebody had hit that. A child to get bruises around the kidneys, somebody had to hit her. On the abdomen, somebody had to hit her. Lacerations to the kidneys, somebody had to hit her. Violent force trauma. It shows no self-defensive wounds, which means, you know, the girl has been used to this for a while, so she just allowed it to occur because it was her fault, she would think.
Little Adriana was being tortured on a daily basis. She was coming to school with cuts and bruises. When she was asked, where did you get the cuts and bruises? She told the teachers that the mosquito had done it. Mosquitoes don't carry bats. When neighbors felt sympathetic for her and offered her food, one time she was offered soup, which she accepted and ate, and she had both of her hands placed onto a hot stove. Once they were burned, the aunt and uncle then rubbed toothpaste into them to teach her not to take food from people. In the case of Haley Gray, who was 4 years old when she baked to death in a van, she was in the custody of her mother. The ex-husband sued CPS, and the court and the jury ultimately found that CPS was 51% responsible for the death of little Haley, and that the mother was 49% responsible. DHS took into custody the 3 small sons of that same father, and they placed those 3 boys back with the very woman, the ex-wife, who'd had custody of Haley when she baked to death in that van.
Kidnapping is when a state agency unlawfully removes a child or senior from a family's care by illegally editing court hearing tapes or manipulating the court files.
Victims of state-sanctioned child abductions.
It's difficult to believe how easily and quickly children are removed from their parents without any show of wrongdoing.
This amounts to nothing more than a state-sanctioned kidnapping.
Dockets are doctored.
The transcripts had been altered.
Fabricated medical evidence.
Tapes edited.
The altering of trial audio tapes.
The audio tapes were criminally edited.
Transcript tapes were edited.
Judges fixing transcripts.
Victims of false allegations of abuse.
Evidence of police wrongdoing, of edited tapes, of manufactured evidence.
The evidence is being manufactured.
Father proves courts edit tapes to remove the evidence that goes against the judge's ruling.
Okay. They know what they're doing. And for them to pretend that they don't know that the records are being altered, these are not stupid people.
This is not just overzealous officials claiming to err on the side of caution for children's welfare. This is a systematic confiscation of children from their parents.
The desire to protect children, of course, is a noble desire. However, what this has turned into is an industry.
What you see here may seem fantastic. In fact, they are very common and almost routine.
There's no penalty for government lawyers who incite their witnesses to commit perjury.
There's absolute immunity for prosecutors that could make conduct illegal and prosecute with the full force of government to create crimes.
A new set of crimes. It creates civil orders without rights, without your rights because you weren't there.
We often have what's called an ex parte hearing. That means one where only one side goes in and the other side doesn't get any notice, has no idea that there's a hearing going on, and doesn't even show up because they don't know it's happening.
And the incestuous nature sort of how the courts and the custody evaluators and the party that's being favored by those professionals in the court system kind of collaborate together.
Children, but in some cases the elderly, are effectively confiscated by court officials. Their estates are plundered.
I was put on trial by federal court.
I was sentenced to 6 months in jail.
And I faced a relentless series of charges.
Just 2 words: federal money.
So the incentive is not to keep the child in the home.
What you have now in this country is a situation where the judiciary and the bar are working together to run a criminal racketeering enterprise that is extorting money from people under color of office.
The courts are a criminal enterprise to get money, federal dollars, from the federal government.
The entire justice system has basically collapsed.
Is this a racketeering scheme? It certainly is. It's racketeering, it's extortion, there's a whole bunch of crimes that are going on. And you have judges that are accountable to no one.
We're standing in front of the Billerica House of Correction where I was wrongly incarcerated for most of the 5.5 months until my mother was able to remortgage the house to come up with the $50,000 cash bail that was required.
If you don't pay us this $150 per hour for the next 5 years, we're going to take the kid away from you. That's a little bit more of an extortionistic demand, because that results in money going directly into the pockets of the private individuals and agencies who are benefiting from this public process and using their authority as governmental agents to extort money out of a parent.
I not only discovered that the courts edited hearing tapes, but I discovered the motivation behind their doing these criminal acts, and that is massive federal funding.
The entire judicial system is corrupt.
What they do is they offer the state a bribe or a federal incentive to be involved and conduct themselves in such a manner.
Well, does it create statistics? Is it meant, I don't know that it's meant to create statistics, but it creates cases. And if cases create grants, then so be it.
For every child who is removed from the family home, there are 25 service providers who derive their livelihood from that child's removal. They have a vested interest in maintaining their income. They have a vested interest in maintaining their practice.
Child abuse by public officials.
The worst abuse I've experienced is at the hands of the government, and the worst abuse my child has experienced is at the hands of the government. That's the only abuse that's going on here.
Just to get the word out to the public, I filed a lawsuit against the State Bar for racketeering.
I reported case fixing, criminal activity in a court, and I have done 231 days in jail for basically reporting crimes.
And the consequence was that in secret tribunals, I lost my law license. They took it away, and they would not give me a public trial of the matter.
I had my license to practice law suspended without a hearing.
All total, I was arrested 26 times and prosecuted. Literally thrown in jail and prosecuted.
I'm attorney Eugene Rona, a Pennsylvania attorney who is in the process of being disbarred by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania because I accuse the courts of criminal misconduct for the alteration of court proceeding.
These courts operate in secrecy. They are accountable to virtually no one. They usually leave no record at all of their proceedings.
I had to be silenced through serious discrediting. In other words, discredit me, this former Girl Scout in every sense of the word, by making me a criminal.
They wanted to do anything to see that I didn't win cases.
Lawyers who merely reported that their clients' tapes were illegally edited, boom, they're gone. Yeah. They're terrorized, they're beaten, they're thrown in jail. If I've been beaten, I've been thrown in jail unlawfully, I've been fined $20,000 unlawfully, and I've witnessed other political activists like myself who want to expose this being thrown in jail unlawfully.
And then finally, doing everything you could to psychologically destroy me so that I couldn't assist other people and extract what funds I have so that I couldn't defend myself.
June Maxim, the other speakers, and I are being victimized by domestic terrorists. Domestic enemies of the Constitution who use terror tactics to destroy and suppress all who oppose them.
Investigation of Kentucky's Child Protective Services with a different perspective on what's going on.
We've been doing these stories for 3 years now, alleging abuse of power, falsified documents, lies in court, threats, and retaliation against parents who fight back. We've heard from victims, attorneys, and officials about what's going on, but we haven't heard from the social workers themselves until now. In disturbing detail, they back up many of the things we've reported, that families are harassed and workers are pressured, all in an effort to boost adoption numbers.
She would not ignore a half-dozen allegations of abuse in this foster home. A state social worker was fired.
I did what I felt like I had to do. It was the right thing to do, and I stand by the complaint.
Because Pat Moore of Ellesmere, Kentucky knew she was right, she filed a lawsuit. And last month, the state paid her $380,000 to settle it. When she found that 2 foster parents had criminal records, a son living there with multiple felonies, and a convicted sex offender visiting and sometimes caring for the children, she refused to arrange an adoption. Her CPS supervisors responded with this memo recommending the adoption should proceed quickly.
Our theory is that the basis for this is the tie to the federal money, that every time a child is not placed in a home, the state of Kentucky, through its cabinet, is losing federal money.
It's an allegation we've seen many times in our 3-year-long investigation of Kentucky CPS, that instead of trying to bring families together, the cabinet forces adoptions to earn more federal bonus money. And it apparently started in 2004, when adoptions in Kentucky ballooned to 724, while the federal bonus money more than doubled, from $452,000 the year before to more than $1 million.
Statistics. The cabinet puts pressure on statistics because federal money and state money come from statistics.
This former state social worker is so afraid of retaliation on her family by the cabinet, she asked us to conceal her identity.
You get praise. The cabinet praises you for terminating rights and adopting the kids out immediately.
She says the concerted effort to take children away and put them up for adoption was so brazen, she actually saw someone successfully place an order for children.
Someone could not have a child and wanted a child, so within the community, this certain person saw a family that was in distress, was having a hard time, and relayed to workers that they would like those children. And that's exactly what has happened.
And this former CPS supervisor, who also fears retaliation, says if an order for a child was delayed or denied, her supervisors would roll in and try to overturn local decisions.
This one family was promised a child, and when it happened that the child was going to be reunified with the parent, they called our regional office. Our regional office came down on our county. They harassed the birth parents and that kind of thing because they didn't agree with our decision.
So I didn't get to say bye.
And remember the case of Vanessa Shanks, who had her kids taken away, and when she fought back, saw her relatives' kids taken away, and when she won her appeal, saw her attorney's child taken away? These former CPS workers say that kind of retaliatory power is common, and in this secretive one-side system, they can take your kids away right now if they want to and get away with it.
I can call in a report tomorrow, and I can make it seem very real to the point that a family will be investigated. And whoever gets it could come up with a substantiation of, say, let's say neglect, and it might not be true. But it doesn't matter.
Now, according to data just released a couple of days ago, there's a huge disparity between counties on adoption rates. Some counties reunify with the family 100% of the children they've taken away. Others last year adopted out as high as 82% of the children they removed from the home. If you want to look at the stats and more, we have a link to the Child Welfare Report in the Target 32 section of our website. It's WLKY.com.
My name is Nancy Schaefer, and I'm from the state of Georgia in the United States. And thank you for your gracious invitation to join you tonight. And thanks to all of you who have made this incredible World Congress of Families #5 in Amsterdam possible. It's a privilege for me to join you tonight and to be with you in some pro-family policy here. I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. I served in the Georgia State Senate, and after 4 years of viewing the ruthless and unsparing actions of Child Protective Services, also called CPS, which I will use tonight, I wrote a scathing report entitled The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services. Thank you. The report cost me my Senate seat. Here's some copies of the report, if you'd like to get one. However, there are causes worth losing over, and this is one. I'm going to talk about some of the problems and then some realistic, maybe, solutions for families and children, and maybe look to some steps that we can take. This is not to say that there are not those children in wretched situations who need to be removed. There are, and we all agree. But tonight, I'm talking about those children removed from their homes intentionally for profit. Children are seized unnecessarily from their families due to the federal aid created in 1974 entitled the Adoption and Safe Families Act. It offers financial incentives to the states that increase adoption numbers. To receive the adoption incentives or bonuses, local CPS must have more children. They must have more merchandise to sell. Funding is available when a child is placed in a foster home with strangers or placed in a mental health facility and medicated, usually against the parents' wishes. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children to their parents. This is abuse of power. It is lack of accountability. And it is a growing criminal political phenomenon spreading around the globe. Oftentimes, but not always, poor parents are targeted to lose their children because they do not have the wherewithal to hire an attorney or fight the system. Being poor and lacking proper housing does not mean your children should be removed. CPS has redefined poor to mean psychologically inferior. Therefore, it is in the best interest of the child to be removed. Best interest, of course, has also been redefined at the child's expense. It has been reported over and over that 6 times as many children die in foster care than in the general public. Once a child is legally kidnapped and placed in official safety, the child is far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation and or rape. Case workers and social workers are often guilty of fraud. They withhold and destroy evidence, and they seek wrongly to terminate parental rights while being protected by state immunity. There is a huge bureaucracy made up of judges, court-appointed attorneys, guardian ad litems, social workers, state employees, court investigators, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, foster parents, adoptive parents, and on, who are looking to the children in state care for their job security. Judges have control over private living arrangements and income of 48.3 million Americans. The United States Census Bureau reported in 2002 that $40 billion in transfer payments were made between households of custody parents and other parents. That money, $40 billion, is under the direction and control of family court judges in environments covered with confidentiality laws that protect the wrong people. Fathers are victims of this unjust system.
Investigators are at the Northeast Georgia home of former state senator Nancy Schaefer. She and her husband were found dead there earlier today. Fox 5's George Franco joins us live from Habersham County with the story. George.
Deidre, I'm in the town of Turnerville, about 5 miles north of Clarksville in Habersham County, and just down the road there is the crime scene where the GBI and Habersham County Sheriff deputies are investigating the apparent murder-suicide of former state senator Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce. The GBI says they were called to the home of the Schaefers at the Orchard Private Golf Community just after 6 tonight. We're told family members found Nancy and Bruce Schaefer dead in their home. Investigators are still trying to determine exactly what happened, and so far have not indicated who killed whom. But they do say that both Nancy Schaefer and her husband Bruce were shot to death.
Preliminarily, it looks to be a murder-suicide. The GBI has 6 agents on the scene, 2 crime scene specialists. There will be a thorough investigation.
And the GBI is being thorough with this investigation. We are expecting to be debriefed on exactly what they have found in a little while. That is coming up, a news conference they're telling us. But some details about the folks. We're told that the Schaefers moved here to Habersham County after living for 35 years in Atlanta. They have 5 children, 4 sons and a daughter, and also clearly a lot of people who are mourning their loss this night. Reporting live tonight in Habersham County, I'm George Franco, Fox 5 News.
All right, thank you, George. The deaths of Mrs. Schaefer.
Because that's what it is. It's a viper pit. When you go into that courtroom, they'll do this to you, but you sit down, you be quiet, and they're just waiting there, and they pounce on you, and it's all driven by money. All of the taking of the children that is going on right now. This
federal
Susan
grants, VAWA money.
This No Child Left Behind. They get 85. The Susan Detlefson that has a program up there, Mother Interrupted, doing tremendous work. Was doing all this investigation. They get $85,000 from the federal government every time they take one of those little ones and put them up for adoption.
So the $10,000 adoption fee is just the start of it.
This is the start of it. So everyone's feeding off of this federal money that is coming in, and all they're focused on is getting the money. They talk about keeping their numbers up.
So Roger, answer me straight up. Is Child Protective Services just an official government kidnapping ring?
Basically, yes.
Bingo.
Yes.
You heard it from a former prosecutor, a former member of the Oregon Bar Association. Is Child Protective Services just an official government kidnapping ring?
Basically, yes.
可能。你也許不信，你也許不知道，民主背後竟有這傷痕。刑事發生，當奸貪私計，屈你終不忿。現在愛子失去，而知道權奸犯會得到稱讚，多少有點激憤。